Hi, my name is Laurie. I guess I'll start with the beginning. I got fibromyalgia, or first developed it at 19 when I was in college. I started having problems with my feet. I had been a competitive runner since being very young, and I was used to very long distances, and suddenly I couldn't run the same distances. I started getting all sorts of injuries, having trouble. My feet hurt, couldn't hold a pen, saw a bunch of doctors. First they thought I had arthritis, and then it tested negative for the tests for arthritis. And finally someone told me, a doctor, that I had fibromyalgia and gave me a packet that said, "You have fibromyalgia, there's no cure, we don't know what it is, and there's no real medication you can take to make it go away." So I just sort of accepted that I had it for a number of years, as I'm sure many people do. But by the time I was 25, the pain was getting much worse. I was having a much harder time holding a job. My energy level was extremely low. I started law school when I was 26, and I went to school in Michigan. The cold was so bad and so intense for my muscles, and for anyone who has fibromyalgia and they're familiar with. And I finally had to leave before the end of my first year. After that, I found a new doctor. This treatment protocol caused exaggerated pain a couple of days a week, and at this point, by the time I was 27 or 28, I was having difficulty holding any kind of a job at all. I was exhausted. I was in excruciating pain at least 2 days a week. By a year later, it was up to 3 or 4 days a week. By the time I was 30, I had trouble walking about half the week. My body would just shut down, and I would be unable to drive from wherever I was. I never knew when it was going to happen. Whoever I was with would have to grab a wheelchair if we were in a public place, or help escort me back to the car. I was pretty much trapped in my apartment, more or less. I could barely work. I was trying to work part-time for my dad, but could barely concentrate. There were whole days that would pass in a row where I couldn't read at all. I just couldn't make sense of the letters. I had been a voracious reader and a really good student my whole life, and now I would open the newspaper and not be able to make sense of anything I was looking at. I was honestly contemplating whether it was worth living under these conditions. I was so tired and so weak, and as many people with fibromyalgia know, nobody understands what you're going through. Nobody believes you. I finally found another doctor. He put me on a whole slew of supplements and injections, human growth hormone, heparin to thin my blood, all these supplements, which of course were not covered by insurance. I was so sick from the side effects from the drugs. I was like so groggy during the day, but I didn't know what else to do. At this point, I had a prescription, just to give you an idea of how much pain I was in. I had a prescription for 90 Lorceps a month, which is a form of Vicodin, and something like 90 Flexerils, which is a muscle relaxer. And I was going through that to the end of the month. I was counting my painkillers. When I first heard about Viviane, I was very, very cynical. I had, in desperation over the few years prior to meeting Viviane, seen, I think, 3 different healers and talked to numerous doctors. I'd done research all over the internet. I'd looked up support groups, which all said, well, there's nothing we can do, but you just sort of have to be positive about the pain you're in and hope that your loved ones will put up with it, which just didn't seem like a very good option to me at all. And at the point I'd heard about Viviane, I was in a very cynical place. I'd been disappointed in 3 healers who had been both expensive and completely useless. Maybe they'd been, spiritually uplifting in one way or another, but I was still in the same degree of pain that I'd always been in. So when I heard Viviane, and when I first had heard about it and called her, I was really in a place of negativity. There's so much about fibromyalgia that's been documented in studies and is very objectively real. And the idea at this point that something spiritual or emotional could be causing the pain that I knew I was in, which was very real and very intense and very profound and not in my head, but very objectively painful and powerful. The idea that that could be caused by something spiritual seemed completely bogus to me. And Viviane didn't even spend any time trying to convince me, which was a good thing. She had me talk to 2 other people who she had healed. And I talked to these people and I tested them, thinking that they were some bogus testimonial, because I'd had several other doctors who used testimonials of people and had asked me to be testimonials to save money on my supplements. So I was very, very cynical about talking to anyone who supposedly wanted to do a testimonial. But I talked to these people, and I spent an hour on the phone with one, and another person took over 2 hours talking to me total, and then another hour before I saw Viviane again, which just says a lot about the commitment of those of us who have been completely healed. I tested them, asked them what kind of medications they'd tried, what strategies they'd tried, what kind of doctors they'd seen, and they'd gone even further than I had. One had flown to Canada for the magnet therapy that I'd read about, which was next on my list. One had gone to the clinic in Switzerland that I was thinking I was going to go to eventually. Didn't do anything for them. And both of them considered the day they saw Viviane their birthday. Another thing I wanted to test with the people that I spoke with was the degree of their fibromyalgia. Not that everyone with fibromyalgia isn't in pain and everyone with fibromyalgia isn't suffering, but what I learned over my years of getting worse is that fibromyalgia gets progressively worse and that some people are at different stages. So I was pretty far along, which was actually pretty far along for 30, I think I was 31 at the time, or 32. I was 31. And I was pretty debilitated. I mean, to the point where there would be, I would shake like an old lady for, 2 or 3 days at a time, completely rigid. I mean, I couldn't move at all. There were moments where I'd be called down to dinner and my brothers literally had to carry me down the stairs because I couldn't, it would have taken like an hour to get me down. And so I really wanted to test with the people that I was spoken to, say exactly how far along is your fibromyalgia. Because I'm on Laura's set, and I'm so hardcore with the amount of pain I'm in. I talked to one woman who was on a constant dose of morphine. And I thought, wow, okay, well, she's definitely further along than I am if she's on morphine and I'm on the equivalent of Vicodin. I talked to another young man who was, and she'd been a flight attendant, a professional. I talked to this other young man who was an accountant, who was a successful accountant with a wife and a child. These are not unstable, crazy people. These are very grounded people who are very sick. And I felt a real resonance, a real connectedness to someone who had been a professional, was not a flake, was not trying to come up with excuses like so many other people think, but had genuinely been debilitated and unable to continue living their lives in any meaningful way. And I was persuaded to give Viviane a chance and to see, I don't know, what she could do for me. The process with Viviane is actually surprisingly simple given how incurable the problem supposedly is. It's going back through your life 5 times, going back and visiting all the moments where you've experienced significant amounts of anger, of sadness, of fear, of guilt, and of conflict, and then going further back into time as well. I had a really hard time with this, understanding why I should be